Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeffrey Zuckerman, a translator from French, and a member of the Translators Collective, Cedilla company. We are delighted to be collaborating with the Center for Fiction to bring you this madness series, and are grateful for the Center's support. These translation clinics are intended as knowledge-sharing open sessions for translators and lovers of translation from all backgrounds and experience levels. Each month, we invite a different literary translator to present on or discuss the subject of their choice with a Cedilla member, followed by a Q&A with attendees. Topics may range from questions and theories of craft to submissions, contracts, and other practical concerns. I wish with an eye toward literary translation as a profession. Attendees are encouraged to bring questions from their own practice. These sessions will be recorded and available for later viewing. Live captioning is also available. You can click the CC button on the bottom menu for various options. We invite you to turn your camera on if you like, and set it in for the conversation. Over which everyone except Anton and myself will be muted. Be free to add comments and questions in the chat, which tonight will be moderated by Cedilla member Anton Powell, a translator from Japanese. For the second half of the session, we'll open the conversation. If you're comfortable speaking on screen, raise your hand either by clicking at the bottom of the participants list or by using the reactions button. And you will be invited to unmute your microphone and ask the question yourself. Or if you prefer Alison to read your question, please send it primarily to Cedilla in the chat. We will try to get to all of them, but we apologize in advance if we run out of time. For those who are unable to attend our live events, we encourage you to email questions or comments before or after the session to translationclinics@centerforfiction.org. We hope to make these conversations ongoing to include viewers in as many time zones as possible. And now, let's dive in. Today, we have the good fortune to hear from Anton. Anton translates Korean literature. It has won pen translation grants transatlantically. A graduate of the Korea University College of Law, he has published translations with Global Atlantic, Created Access, Harvard Star, Pegasus Book, and others. He currently divides his time between Seoul and Sangdo. Today, we discuss the ways translators can be political in how they choose and pitch their work in accordance with their beliefs and desires for social change. So, Anton, we talk a bit tonight about how we can be intentional about what we pitch and as if to reinforce the default. Speak as a translator of Korean literature. Can you give us a sense of what the default is? And the idea of being intentional is important here. And I'm curious about how and when it became clear that there was a default that you wanted to push back against.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. The question of the default is very easy to answer for Korean literature and translation. Everything in Korea is regulated. There is a central language authority that determines what is proper Korean and what is not. There is a writer licensing system called the Tungdan that determines who gets to be commissioned for writing a novel or a short story for a magazine publisher. And of course, there is the Literary Translation Institute of Korea. I don't know why I'm doing this, they're not here. The Literary Translation Institute of Korea uses a translation list. They used to have like a list of books that they determine is of books that they determine are ripe for translation or for whatever reason should be translated from Korean into foreign languages. And there's also a sample grant system where translators are given a grant to do a sample, but they kind of, for a long time, they had to choose from only that list. And if they wanted to choose their own books, they had to go through a whole procedure of getting their books onto that list. Now, there's a whole judging process that is involved with the sample grant system. And who are the judges of these sample grants? They are Korean professors. Therefore, academics held great sway over what gets translated and funded. And to this day, they still do, because the current sample grant system for as far as I can see, also uses Korean academics to judge the sample and also judge whether the book is worth translating into a foreign language. There's also the Korea Publishing Industry Promotional Association commissioning system. The Korea Publishing Industry Promotional Association is a different entity from LTI Korea. It was created to kind of give more power to Korean publishers, I believe. And they have a more flexible and more genre-friendly judging system compared to LTI Korea, I find, in practice. I don't know how, either organization feels about their processes, but this is my perspective as a translator. So what does the default look like? It is middle-aged or older. It is cis-het male. The writers are the 80s ideas of progressive politics. How do I describe that? I don't know if maybe like the Golden Notebook by Doris Lessing, the Communist Party members in that book. There's this miasma of misogyny and outright homophobia, but everyone is a communist at the same time. I think young people don't remember progressive politics being like that, but it was very much like that in the 80s and 90s, and up to the 80s and 90s, I believe that book is set in a previous period. And to the point where I can read a Korean book and determine, oh, this is, oh, you went to school, you went to college in the 80s. Like I can clock that writer. So,
that specific.
Yeah. So how different is this from the authors who are actually successful in translation? Han Kang is not a middle-aged cis-het male, and she is much more progressive in her politics. Kyung Suk Shin is also not a cis-het male, and let's look at Son Hong Pyong's Almond, the novel Almond, published by Harper Via in America, I believe, translated by Sandy Jusan Lee. That novel is also does not fit that mold. So the books that are actually successful in translation, the Korean books that are actually successful in English translation, do not fit the mold that academics seem to be pushing in the literary sphere. All of the authors that they do seem to be pushing are what Korean professors and foreign professors read as undergrads or grad students, and they share those kinds of political values and that contemporaneity. So you asked also how my conception of this shifted, and I have to give much credit to younger translators like Sung Ryu, Sophie Bowman, Sojay, Victoria Cottle, and Deborah Smith. Deborah Smith is actually much younger than I am. Although we look up to her so much that we kind of forget that she is a young woman, but she's so successful that it kind of overwhelms everything else about her. And also she is very much a leader in our field. The works that I would specifically like to credit are Sung-Ryu's translation of Bae Myung-hoon's Tower. This, I believe, was the first science fiction book by a single author published in English. The first Korean science fiction book by a single author published in English. And when she brought it to our workshops, it was just so shocking and fresh that there would be this, sorry, let me turn on my do not disturb, that there would be this science fiction work being workshopped at a literary translation workshop. It was just not heard of at the time. And the same goes for Sophie Bowman and Sophie Bowman's translation of Kim Bo-young's I'll Be Waiting for You, which was recently published. But years before this, Sophie Bowman won a PEN Presents. She was a PEN Presents finalist, and that kind of put Korean science fiction on the map as well. And there's also Sojae. Sojae's amazing magazine, which I've talked about in public many times, Chogwa, and their other outreach efforts, such as the Queer Bilingual Reading. There's, of course, Deborah's groundbreaking vegetarian translation. And notably, none of these translators are middle-aged cishet Korean male professors.
That is a really amazing picture of fiction conduct like when it's outside the debate. In the same vein, the two most prominent books we have come out in translation this year, First Bunny and the book City. The perspective and interesting for editors being consumption of Korean literature in different ways, with the projects that you pitch simultaneously. With this way, because that you didn't have, only eggs in one basket. It is something you would have encouraged the translator to try doing, especially only in their careers.
Wow, you have a copy of Love in the Big City that I don't have. What it means to live in New York City. Okay, so I'm always pitching multiple books, obviously not to the same publisher, but I always have a group of samples that I'm pushing. And until you asked me this question, I thought every translator did that. And I'm sure every translator does that to some extent. Cursed Bunny and Love in the Big City, as you point out, are very different. They're not going to be liked by the same publishers. So while one is in submission, I can pitch the other to another publisher. I simply loved these two books too much to not be working on them. They were pitched at the same time to different publishers and accepted almost at the same time and almost translated at the same time. It was quite a ride. There simply are too many great Korean books that are waiting to be translated or to find foreign publishers. And I'm not too bad at switching gears quickly, so it works for me. It's not something I would discourage early career translators from doing, but every translator has their own practice and praxis, their own way of doing things. And this just happens to be mine, just to, keep working and working and working. But don't let other translators implicitly pressure you into doing anything you're uncomfortable with. I'm naturally a chaotic and reckless person, and I'm very greedy. So when I see a book I like, I don't really pause to think about whether I can do the work or not. I simply say, yes. And there's a period where I can't quite believe I can do the work. And then eventually I managed to do it. So getting a law degree was like that. Going through military service was like that. So many things in my life was about being daunted by some challenge that I can't imagine overcoming. And then later finding myself having overcome them. But this is literary translation. There's no reason for you to work yourself to death over it. But don't try to copy someone else's practice. Make your practice fit you. And think of it as a journey and an adventure and have fun with it. And that's the advice I have for emerging translators.
And that embrace of individual practice. In that vein, when you have to decide that something was missing from the literary conversation, did you decide, okay, I'm going to sit down and look for books that we can short script, otherwise Did you come up with a game thing for how you would talk to publishers about those? And how does Smoking Tigers fit into the whole picture?
Yeah, so for me, it really was my fellow Smoking Tigers translators, Sophie Bowman and Sung Ryu, who pushed the envelope for all Korean translators regarding the perception of genre-adjacent works. I don't know if I would have come to the conclusions that I came to without them. I was way too focused on making it in the industry, and to the point where I had younger translators telling me, wow, you need to stop for a moment and think about what you're doing. Younger translators, they're much younger, some of them. They're like 15 years younger, some of them. And when I say that they changed the perception of genre adjacent works, because Cursed Bunny is kind of genre and Love in the Big City is sort of genre, but maybe not really, but it kind of is in a way. By perception, I don't mean my perception so much as Korean funding bodies' perceptions. Funding is, of course, crucial in Korean literature because the lack of incentives for literary translators. Korean translators, you can find quite a few Korean translators who make 6 figures a year. There's no reason for them to be literary translators. They can do other work that's more fulfilling financially and professionally. So funding is kind of crucial to incentivize translators to stay in literary translation. With Sophie's Pen Presents win and Sung Ryu's championing of an out-of-print book that she brought back from the dead, it kind of made Korean rights holders and even Korean academics kind of sit up and notice. When I say that Sung brought an out-of-print work back from the dead, the book she was translating was literally out of print. And it was when news got out that she had managed to secure her contract with Onford Rights that people were like, oh, let's talk about this book that's out of print. And then the book came back into print with a different publisher. So that shows the powers that be, not so much the reading public, but like the funding bodies and the academics, that Korean genre fiction has literary merit and it can be respected in Anglophone publishing. And the first thing you have to do is, as a translator, is to realize that translators are not passive cogs in the publishing machine, but powerful advocates and shapers of the literary discourse. I will say this until the day I die. Hankang was a cult favorite in Korea and only broke into mainstream success after The Vegetarian was translated by Deborah Smith and after it won the Booker. The translation affected how the book was read in Korean, and it suddenly became a big Korean bestseller when it really wasn't before. As I mentioned, Bae Myung-hoon's Tower came back from the dead after Sung Ryu's translation. And a literary critic here in Korea commented that my translation revived interest in Bora Chung's Cursed Bunny in Korea, where it bounced back up the speculative fiction bestseller list. And I will hate Ted Chiang forever for keeping Cursed Bunny at number 2. So having seen my fellow Smoking Tigers operate like this, it really inspired me to really carefully examine what I wanted to read, as opposed to what I thought might sell. Because what you as a reader feels is what sells, not what Twitter or LTI Korea decides through a committee. LTI literally decides this through a committee, through their suggested works for translation list. And I'm pretty sure none of the Smoking Tigers works mentioned just now were ever on that list, and Cursed Bunny certainly was not. So the number one thing is to trust yourself and trust your reading, because that is what sells, the fact that you are feeling something for this book. In terms of how Smoking Tigers work together, we absolutely rehearsed our pitches together and we talked about where to submit and all that. And we hook each other up with connections with publishers and agents, of course. But I think more than anything else, it's this feeling that we are in a movement together. And that is just so incredibly inspiring and encouraging. We are constantly talking about the future of Korean literature in translation. And being in workshops where I get to see that future unfold, where translators constantly bring work that changes the way I feel and think of literature and the world, that's how Smoking Tigers fits into the picture. And it doesn't have to be Smoking Tigers. You can create your own collective. My dream is for there to be 100 Korean translation collectives, 1,000 multilingual collectives. I'm actually in 2 collectives because I also meet regularly with my BCLT 2020 summer school cohort, and the vibes between the 2 collectives are very different, and I need them both. In terms of publishing plans and strategies in general, I honestly am not that organized. I just keep an eye out for opportunities and submit during submission windows. But also, if I make a connection somewhere, like at Alta, then I follow up with it and be like, oh, hey, like we met, I pitched to you that one time, or like one of my Smoking Tigers might, make the connect for them, and then I would pitch to them. But like Curse Bunny, like I pitched to them in the middle of the street. I pitched to Onford Star and like on the street. And Love in the Big City, like, we were getting drunk, and like I was asked like, oh, do you have like, I really love that Sangyang Park short story. Like, do you have anything by him that's like a novel? And I was like, let me see what I can do. And so I'm just ready to jump into Princess Carolyn mode, like at the drop of pen.
It you did train it in a Princess Caroline at moments. Seem to do a good thing for books. I think this might be a good moment to move into the Q&A. What do you think? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So to move into the Q&A. Sorry. Okay. So as we move into the Q&A, we invite you to turn your camera on if you like, to repeat if you're comfortable, speak on screen, raise your hand either by clicking at the bottom of the participants list or by using the reactions button. And you will be invited to unmute your microphone and ask the question yourself. If you prefer for Alison to read your question to you, just send it privately to Cedilla in the chat. We will try to get to all of them, but we apologize in advance if we run out of time. Right. Alison.
We don't have any questions yet. Does anybody want to raise? Oh, somebody just raised their hand.
We have one from Jeremy.
Hi, Anton. Hi, Jeffrey. Thanks for this really great conversation. I was wondering, Anton, you're talking a lot about essentially signaling to funding bodies and to publishers what is sellable or what is publishable in terms of which awards or which measures of prestige certain books get. Is there the possibility of actually being a part of these conversations rather than having to be on the outside, kind of sending out smoke signals, as it were? What would it take to get translators to have a seat at those tables?
Well, we can become Booker Prize judges like some people. I know Jeffrey worked at a publishing house at some point, and I'm just very reluctant to kind of suggest more work for translators, because shouldn't translators just translate? Like, do we really have to do all of this work? Where I was having this conversation with someone who was like asking me about the like, oh, how do you coordinate the rights between the head contract, the author's contract with the publisher, and your contract as a translator? And I was like, how would I know what's in the head contract? Like, no one tells me that. Like, even if I asked, I don't think they would tell me that. And I was like, is this something that I have to know? Wow, and I kind of like got into a panic, and I messaged Jeffrey. I don't know if you remember this, Jeffrey, but I was like, is it normal to like know what's in the head contract? So I don't know. The kind of the nature of publishing as you guys know, but for the benefit of the audience, is that it's not exactly like a science where, I mean, I think Penguin Random House is trying to use data to kind of predict how well certain books will do, but they're very much in the minority. And it's very much a kind of economy of persuasion where you have to constantly persuade someone, and then that person has to persuade a bunch of people, and then those people have to publish the book and then persuade readers to buy it, and those readers have to persuade each other to read it. And so it's this kind of like constant work of persuasion, I feel. And in order to be persuasive, you have to have conviction, or you have to have like an idea of why something would sell. And in order to have that, you have to have read the book and read the source. And at the publishing stage, where there is no translation yet and there's only the source, like you're the only person who knows what's in the book, but at the same time, the translator is the only person who also speaks in the target language. So it's kind of becomes your job to persuade all of these people, agents, you know, marketing people, editors, publishers, like all of those people, like that this is a really great book and you should publish it / read it / market it. And I think that's kind of like been the primary way in which translators kind of work within the machine. It's a very, I don't want to say it's a passive way because it is actually active in its way, but I also think that it is more powerful than we think. But at the same time, the power is not very explicit. So it's a very like ambiguous power. And the really weird part of all that for me is fine if that happens in the publishing side, but then after it's published, I have to persuade readers to read it. It's like, that's the part where it's kind of, I find it's a little odd that we have to do this, but you know, we're all doing this. You guys are doing it. And and people kind of like go, oh, like translators are such attention hogs, and like they're trying to get like all of this like attention when it's the work that matters. And no, the work matters, of course, but it is an economy of persuasion. And if no one is doing the persuading, like if my author does not speak English, they're not going to be doing the persuading. So I have to do the persuading. That's who it falls to. And of course, the lovely marketing and publicity people, but not all publishers have marketing departments and publicity departments. So guess who gets to do that work? And I'm sorry, this answer is maybe not super cheerful, but I just want to give people the lay of the land. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the really, to echo what Anton is saying, there's really the power that translators have before they sit down and translate the whole book in, find words in English for what they're seeing in the original, is that ability to convey the passion and excitement they have, that not something that any other reader in a publisher department can provide. So we have that one productive talent, take from every interest and let that excitement be the turn into that way. That's how you can take something that only you could possibly care about and find a way to make a heck of a lot of other people care about it.
We have a couple of questions from the participants here. One from Hannah Kim. She asks, how do you feel that the English language market's perception of Korean literature differs from Korea's perception of Korean literature?
Intent, that's all you.
Yeah, this is an excellent question. It's very different. How do I say this without getting into trouble? Is there a way to say this without getting into trouble with my funders? No. Let's just say that it's, oh God, I wish I could tell you. It's very different. The kind of like, you know, middle-aged, cishet, loved by academics, 80s politics trope, like cliche that I told you, that is still very much the norm. And that is still very much what certain bodies would like to push. And then they actually publish those books or fail to publish those books because no one wants to buy them for the price that they feel like they deserve. Then, you know, who gets blamed? The translators get blamed, like, oh, that author did not find the right translator. And I'm like, no, like 7 different translators have 7 different samples of that same author. At some point, it's you. It's not us. And I don't like, but no matter how many times those authors fail, they are given another chance and another chance and another chance by funding bodies. And I just don't understand like why it won't get into their heads that the world that they think exists does not exist in the actual world. But it's a constant battle that Korean translators have to fight. And like we're always sending, like so much of our work is like sending emails to funding bodies and academics and like demanding like, why is this being funded? Why did you allow this ridiculous article to be published? Like, why are you promoting this problematic author who is very sexist and sexual harassy and like, you know, like, so that's like a constant battle, and that has been a really big issue in my field. It's not, and it's also with like Korean publishers who would be like, oh, this author deserves this much money for their advance because they're so important in Korea. And I'd be like, yeah, they're important in Korea. No one knows, like we have to build a readership overseas. But they're like, no, they already have a readership. And I'm like it's a whole thing. And I don't know how to overcome it aside from to continue to pretend to be more polite than I actually am and get the rights, build a readership, and get the book out there. Yeah.
We have some, I'm going to alternate between the people who are asking questions themselves and the people who have sent in their questions. So I'd like to invite Madhu Kaza.
Take down my hand.
Madhu.
Hi, everyone. This is really wonderful. It's great to hear this conversation. And I really love the articulation of like the agency of the translator and that like the activation of the translator in this process. I'm sorry, I have a slightly kind of multifaceted question, but because like one part of that is a little bit troubling to me, like the kind of emphasis around persuasion, which of course we have to persuade editors and publishers, and yet it also like what I'm thinking of Nick Glastonbury's essay that people might have read about like his inability to persuade publishers to publish Kurdish and Turkish texts that he thought were amazing, and not having to do not with his charms of persuasion, right? But as Anton, as you were saying, it's like about maybe funding bodies, but also about in the same way that we can talk about the racism in American publishing, I think we can hopefully talk about the imperialism of literature and translation and the way that things cycle. And so I'm really curious not just to like name that, because we all know that hopefully, but to think about strategies for working through this. And I keep coming up against a question around taste. And I think, of course, like we have to identify as translators work that really compels us so that we can make the strongest case. But as a translator from Telugu, for instance, where I have like my own taste as a reader is segmented. Like I have a different literary sensibility in one language than I do in another. And I think about texts that I think are really interesting in a South Asian context, but are not going to appeal to an American reader because the literary values are really different. They're not written for a global audience. They're not like the so-called Murakami kind of text, right? And so I'm thinking about how do I frame and kind of make progress in that realm. And a question I have around, so I'm just curious if you have thoughts about that generally. And one question I have that's more specific related to that is I'm curious about the editorial process in Korean publishing, because one of the thoughts I have related to all of this is many of the literatures of the world that are not American, not Anglo-American, it's a very different editorial process. So books will make it into print without having that long production line. And so I, as a translator, when I'm working with Telugu text, often I act as an editor as well as translator, and I will like be much more radical than I would maybe be if I was translating a, Mexican writer's poem or something. And I'm just curious, like, it's just something I'm trying to work through for myself, like my interventions, not to explain or dumb down or simplify a text, but I'm trying to fit something into like English that fits into an Indian English, but does not, maybe reach an American sensibility. So sorry, it's a long-winded question, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so great question. Let me answer the second part first, the editorial process. I think for me, the fun of translation is to make something that shouldn't fit into English. And how do you do that? I wish I had a satisfying answer for you, but so one of my idols, Arunava Sinha, who translates from Bangla. I love his work. I asked him, because he's so great at glossing, which is, you know what I mean when, you foreignize a word, but then you kind of explain what the foreignized word is within the text using very subtle like signals within the text. And he's so like excellent at that. And I would read his translation and it would be full of, basically Bangla words like alphabetized, but I would still understand what those things were and what everything was going on in the book. And I would be so moved by the book. I would cry in the book. I would laugh because of the book. And I asked him, how do you do that? Because I would like to do that too. And his answer was, I don't know, I just do it intuitively. And that is so unhelpful, Arnava, but that is what he said. And I think it's just something that you kind of develop with practice, but it's something that it might be a matter of attitude where it's not so much, I mean, I'm sure there is a kind of colonial, decolonial aspect to it, but there's also a kind of like, challenge, like how much can I get away with? How much can I get away with, not domesticizing, with how much can I get away with foreignizing? Or if I change certain things in the text, like how much can I get away with it? You can also go that way, the more invasive direction. And of course, you should think about every single one of your choices, case by case. But I think try to have fun with it is kind of my advice for that. And you'd be surprised with what you would get away with. For example, Love in the Big City, I've told this story many times. The editor there, Peter Blackstock, he actually restored a lot of Korean expressions and a lot of Korean foreignizations that I had taken out.
How did he know?
I know. He's not even Korean, and it would be him, not, a Korean assistant or whatever. Like one of the most famous thing is banchan. I said side dishes. And then he goes, oh, do you mean banchan? Just say banchan, don't say side dishes. I will do that, yeah. So like stuff like that. And they're very kind of, like Grove Atlantic, I'm not sure if they have done a lot of translations, but they were very, they were very open and very like welcoming of, foreignized text. And I really, really appreciate them doing that. And of course, pretty much all the houses I've worked with, like, Onford Star, Tilted Axis. The first part of your question, it's very interesting. Like, how do I pitch something that, people on this side, on the Anglo side, are not going to kind of sympathize with? I'm going to give you a very American answer. You have to use yourself and what you feel about the source text. Like, you have to insert yourself into it. Somehow, in your pitch, you have to be like, I was walking down whatever street in whatever city in India, and there was this lovely book, and I opened it, and like whenever I read this book, I'm transported back to that moment. Come up with something, preferably come up with something that is actually true, because that's what's going to resonate. There is a personal reason why you wanted to translate this book. And that personal reason contains a kernel of emotion that no one is going to be able to replicate. The publicity department is not going to replicate it. The, the source publisher is not going to be able to replicate it. Like even the editor is not going to be able to replicate it. Only you, because translators are readers, you will have that emotional kernel, that emotional connection with the book. And you have to present that emotional connection in your pitch. Like, why is Cursed Bunny so moving to me? Like, and I'd be like, because, it's feminist horror. It's not immediately something that a cisgender Korean man would like connect to. And I'd be like, well, I'm gay. And, there's a lot of overlap between queerness and feminism. And so I talked about like how I discovered the book, like how the book made me feel. But the key here is me, like how it made me feel, how I discovered the book. And I put those details into like everything that I kind of submitted it for, not just a pitch, but also for the Penheim grant, which it won. And so because I was able to kind of appeal, I believe, and to persuade on a personal, emotional level, I feel like that was a big kind of like reason why it managed to enter into the Anglosphere. Of course, this is not a not problematic method because, it's emotional labor for you. It makes you vulnerable. And like, why should you reveal so much about yourself or, someone else's work? Although in a lot of ways, your translation is your work. It's just like, it's just the method that I have found works for me to make that personal connection. And it may not work for you, or you may not want to do it. And that's totally fine as well. I hope that's helpful.
Our next question is, I'm going to read, this is from Nathan. I have a question, how do you handle all of the responsibilities that publishers, rights holders, etc. place on translators when you're just trying to make a good pitch as a reader, translator, and artist? Is the trick just not to let them see you sweat? I mean, this is sort of overlapping from, but I think it's an extension of what we're just answering from Madhu's question.
I want to kind of really quickly say that of those responsibilities supersede on the translator. So sometimes knowing how to say no is very important. I'm going to do a lot of things. I'm not going to do that. But that's my short answer, and I'm guessing Anton has much more detailed thoughts. Is that right?
Like, I had this contract where they had this like social media clause where if I don't promote the book on social media after it's published for a certain period of time, they can cancel the entire contract. And I'm like, A, you've already published the book at that point. What are you going to cancel? And B, I'm like, what? Like, well, that makes no sense. And so, I think I said like, oh, I'm willing to do social media. I live on social media. I am, an attention W word, but I do not want to necessarily want that in a contract. And so, so I kind of got rid of like a subclause that, had to do with the penalties of not following it, et cetera, et cetera. I know this is very boring, but you should say no. And the point of the contract especially is to outline what your understanding of your responsibilities are. So you really have to read every clause of your contract. You'd be surprised at how many people don't read their own contracts, like every clause of their contract. In law school, I had a professor who pointed out that, yeah, we live in a statutory system, but you guys don't read statutes. And I'm like, I don't read statutes. I just read cases. And then I am like, oh, I finished studying. But no, of course you should read the statutes. And a surprising number of lawyers don't read statutes, and a surprising number of translators don't read the clauses in their contracts. So having an understanding of what your responsibilities are and negotiating that is very important. Although I think this question is a bigger question. It's like, how do you negotiate your responsibilities. The thing is, always remember that people are going to try to get as much labor out of you as possible. And that's kind of their job. And you can say no, like Jeffrey said. And you can also kind of look for funding opportunities that fund that kind of activity, like, you know, making samples. In LTI Korea offer, who I should say more nice things about because they are nice people. LTI Korea, they have a publicity grant, for example. And so I was doing all this publicity work for one of my books. And at one point I was like, wait a minute, why don't I have to find a way to get paid for this because this is way too much work. And so I asked LTI, hey, remember me? Can I have some, you know? And so, and that, you know, that worked out. So like, you kind of have to, it's a combination of like, you get savvier about money and about like asking for money and finding out where to get the money as you progress in your work. But yeah, definitely have like read your contract and have the understanding between you very clear what your responsibilities are. And second, try to find funding. Third, say no.
I would like to invite Alta to ask her question.
Hi everyone, and Jeffrey and Anton, thanks for a really wonderful discussion. I'm going to somewhat piggyback on part of Madhu's question. First, I also want to thank you, Anton, for the phrase a miasma of misogyny. That's going to be stuck in my head. You talked a lot about funding bodies, and I appreciate your sort of critical eye toward the problems and potential pitfalls of relying upon funding agencies. And I'm wondering if you have any sort of strategizing tips for anyone who's in this particular Zoom room who might be working from a less well-funded language. I work from 2 languages. One has a very well-oiled machine of funding, which comes with many problems. The other, the machine doesn't really work. So, and those are both European languages, which are given, you know, because of the certain things that we mentioned before, like much easier to pitch than some other works or languages. So I don't know, I mean, this might not be your own personal experience, but do you have any ideas for for people who want to bring work from lesser well-funded languages that the world really wants to hear from?
Yeah, this is literally the $1 million question. It's just that the Korean system is so specific and the machine, not so well oiled, but it's like, you know, it's so there and present and it takes up so much space and so much air in the room that if you don't understand how the funding machine works in Korean, it's very difficult to really do anything in the field, quite frankly. My advice to the people in this room, perhaps, is to seek out other translators who are in a similar situation as you, for example, and seek out there's certain like funding that is like language agnostic, for example. You know, like Pen translates. Pen translates, but the publisher applies for that. Penheim is the Pen America one. And so with that, you can kind of like ask people like, oh, what is your experience applying to that, and like why do you think you succeeded? I posted my Penheim application kind of cover letter on my blog on antonher.com. You can go read it. I think Jeremy Tian also made his public. So seek out information from funding, people who won funding like that. There's like a National Endowment for the Arts thing also that does translation. And I'm not eligible because I'm not an American citizen or an American resident. But I know people in this room, some people in this room will be. And there are also a lot of like residency opportunities that don't necessarily fund the translation directly, but they will fund it indirectly and give you time and space to do like the bulk of your work. And so seek those out. These are very obvious answers.
The other thing I might add to that is it is by being part of a community that you establish for yourself is useful to discuss which purposes are going to be taken up, but that then very much depend on outside funding to cover their books, but which purposes tend to have enough wiggle room that they can take on books that they need to actually pay for themselves. So no, some person really, they really cannot come out a lot of space for something that's going to need a lot of investment at their part. And that the other purposes, like honestly, any of the big buying purposes where, okay, isn't it the $10,000? Why not? So, but of course, the purposes that have more money tend to be the ones that agents compete a lot more easily than translators can. So that's where being part of a community is really helpful, because then you're friends with a lot of people who have connections and friendships with different purposes, who may be willing to hear a pitch from a translator say, why not? This sounds cool. Let's spend some money on this to see what happens. So finding all those ways to get the door open is really the first step. And then after that, yeah, it's the persuasion economy, as Anton put it.
We have a question from Hannah Allen. In response to efforts to make the literary publishing spheres more diverse, certain marginalized authors have expressed concern over being reduced to a label that has nothing to do with their race, skin color, gender identity, sexual orientation, or other factor. They worry that their work will be seen and evaluated according to such labels rather than being appreciated as a work of literature in the larger sense. How do we as translators balance authors' desire not to be cast as mere representatives of literature from a certain race, gender, culture, etc., while facing the reality that some publishers explicitly seek works from authors based on such identity-related factors?
Honestly, I've never had this problem, and I don't know how to answer it. Because while my authors, I'm sure they don't appreciate being pigeonholed into some kind of, wow, this is Korean literature and Korea is cool, whatever. I am all about, if you have an inch, you exploit it to the max. And you just like, oh, BTS once was in an Instagram story where they held up the book. I'm going to talk about that until the end of time. And I have for one of the books that I am translating right now. I think, I don't know. I think it's very different for Korean literature, because while there are a lot of stereotypes and a lot of like really bad kind of ideas that people have about Korea and Korean literature, we are in the sort of process of getting better. I think, you know, Parasite winning Best Film did a lot for the Korean image. BTS does a lot for the Korean image. And like so we are kind of like riding that wave right now. Before, when that was not the case, it was very difficult to kind of make other people not see that, not see those, like the cisgender, you know, middle-aged Korean man, kind of like that stereotype of Korean literature, the kind of like Imunyol archetype of Korean literature. And I don't know, it's just like you kind of have to emphasize in your pitch, I guess, that I know, like, you know the big diversity racket is there, but you kind of like, but you kind of have to use it and not use it at the same time. Like, you kind of have to be like, when you're pitching, you know that will get you in the door, but it's not going to get in, it's not what's going to get you into being actually published, because a lot of these diversity initiatives, like they amount to nothing. Like nothing happens. They pretend to read a bunch of manuscripts and then they don't publish your work. So it may get you in the door, but it's the author's work that's going to really, really matter. And that's basically what you have to tell your author, that this is the way it just works in hyper-capitalist Anglosphere culture, where you kind of use whatever edge you have to get through the door, and then you have to sell the book somehow, and then you hit them with the content. And that's where really the author comes in. I don't know, this is a really smarmy answer, but it's a very like smarmy industry, and maybe this is the answer that the industry deserves.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, no matter how much people want to subdivide a book or an author to set up labels or parameters, the book of it is going to be more complicated. It's the most powerful thing that you could do as a translator. When you page a book, when you translate it, when you talk about it afterwards, it will celebrate the complexity, put the complexity at the forefront. Labels only stick and would allow them to, the more you push back against them, the more people have to notice and engage with the complexity that is there and that deserves to be recognized. That's my take. As I said, probably at the point for a large question, but is there anything else you wanted to say, Anton, before that? Okay, so this is the question that we ask of a single co-host. The question is, what would an ideal future of literary translation look like to you?
So what does the ideal future of literary translation look like to me? So I don't want to be able to predict or foresee the future of literary translation. I want to be completely surprised and my mind to be blown, maybe by someone in this room right now. I walk into every workshop hoping to see what my translator colleagues have brought for me today. And sometimes that work is so mind-blowing and so exciting that I can't wait for the translation to be sold, finished, and published. So everyone will get to share in the excitement. I don't want 50 books by middle-aged Korean men translated by Korean studies professors. I want the work that's going to blow my mind. And I'm so tired of people in publishing being like, oh, I have to be so intellectual, and oh, this is what the reader wants. And no, the reader doesn't know what they want until they see it. And they're not going to see it until it's published. And that's just the black swan nature of publishing, and you can't predict what it's going to be. But once it's here, it's going to seem like it was inevitable. And so translators, go out there and be that black swan event.
Be that black swan. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again to the Center for Fiction for hosting these clinics. Thank you again, Anton, for joining us tonight. Translation clinics take place on the third Thursday of every month. Please sign up to be notified of upcoming events. Next month, Arthur Price will talk with Chen Jiang about crafting the backstories of our projects and our songs. The registration link is in the chat and on the Center for Fiction's website. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Please stay safe.